what is it they say? I think it's good things are worth waiting for. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes you just have to wait a little bit, but that's okay. You have found season 7, episode number 25. I fixed the numbering. I apologize. I've been one number off for like 4 weeks in a row. Episode 25 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2025 Belgian GP review show. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. Cody, it is good to be seeing you, sir. How goes it?
It goes well. I spent a lot of the weekend out in the very, very hot Midwest weather. It was well worth it. It was a good time, but yeah, we had to wait a little while to get this show out because I came home yesterday and was like sun destroyed. So my apologies.
Oh, no, nothing to apologize for. I kind of figured from where you were coming. I knew where you were going, and I knew where you were coming back from, and I'm like, I wasn't surprised when you said, let's try to do this another night. So, no, all's forgiven, all good. Absolutely no problem. We hope the show is good enough to have been waiting for. That's what we're hoping to do here. But if you have found it, welcome along, as always, as David Croft likes to say. You can find us on Twitter, or not Twitter, X. It's what that's called now. Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course here on YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for that. If you like what you're seeing and you enjoy what you're hearing overall, you can leave us you can click a like button on YouTube. You can click the subscribe button and get notified when we drop content out. If you're on your favorite podcasting app and you enjoy the show, do us a solid and click the 5-star review button. That helps our show come up a little bit better in F1 related search results, which is why everybody tells you to do all those lovely things at the start of every single piece of content that I've ever watched. You can email the show, outlapf1@gmail.com. We'll get your messages to us. Thank you so much to Outlap F1 Nation who continue to support the show. Thank you so much to specifically Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to help the show out a little bit financially, we do have an anchor page, $1, $5. You are not obligated to do that whatsoever. We just enjoy the fact that you're listening to the show. But if you'd like to do that, you can leave us a small donation. What does that do? It helps us keep our technology current, keep our recording platform up and active, and all of that other good stuff. All right, the particulars are out of the way. Cody, I'm going to try to play your headline of the day here. I did find it, so here we go.
And it is perfect, and it is applicable. Yes, my headline of the day is "You Shall Not Pass." It all started on Saturday. Max Verstappen gets the lead in the sprint race, and we saw very quickly that despite the fact McLaren had a much faster car, they could not do anything about Max because he had just enough straight line speed that nobody could pass him. In fact, there wasn't really a whole lot of passing going on at all. And I figured, okay, we're going to get over to Sunday. It's going to be wet. You know, there'll be a little bit more action, and honestly, it's just as bad. Piastri gets pretty much the same move done on Lando on the first time down Kemmel Straight on the very first lap of the race, and then really not a whole lot happening up front. I'm pretty sure the top 6 got into the order that they were going to be in within like the first few laps, and then it didn't really change for the rest of the race. Not a lot of passing unless your name was Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, eventually I will tell you my formula to how to kill a F1 race, and this one pretty much ticked just about all of the boxes. My headline of the day is, yes, good things are usually worth waiting for, but that was a bit much. FIA being a tad conservative, I think, is the nice way to say it. We will talk about what I think went into that decision. I think he let some of the junior formula, the race director let some of the junior formula kind of influence his decision, and I think you shouldn't do that because you have to remember those are kids. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I also told you back in the British GP review, I told you that Oscar Piastri was going to get pissed off, and pissed off Piastri was going to be a thing, and I was right. So pissed off Piastri was a thing. Lap 1, and good night. And that was pretty much all she wrote. He was in control of that race following the first lap. I was pulling for Lando. I love the fact that they at least went for a gamble on tires. It could have worked, but one too many mistakes and not to be. But yeah, I mean, we were talking in the pre-show. I'm like, I should be happier. I got a 1-2. Why do I feel so unsatisfied? But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's kind of my headline of the day. But we will start. We will rewind and we will go all the way back to Friday afternoon in Spa, where we had the sprint qualifying. And of course, now I had the one sound all ready to go. I have to find the other ones. Just give me a second. All right. You're going to hear this sound a lot tonight. There we go. All right. So going out in P20. Did not expect this one at all, especially given the weather that we talked about. Kimi Antonelli and the Mercedes. Ouch. P19 was Franco Colapinto. P18, here's the other ouch and the other shocker of SQ qualifying, was Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari. P17 was Nico Hulkenberg. P16 was Alex Albon. Advancing through to Q2 but going no farther, P15 was Lance Stroll. P14, Fernando Alonso. P13, both Mercedes not in the top 10 shootout. George Russell in the Mercedes. P12 was Yuki Tsunoda. P11 was Liam Lawson. The top 10 from 10 to 1. Gabriel Bortoleto getting it done on qualifying pace for Kick Sauber there into the top 10. Nicely done there, sir. P9 was Isaac Hadjar. P8, Pierre Gasly. P7, Ali Behrman. And P6, best qualifying for a long time for him was Carlos Sainz in the Williams. P5, star of qualifying other than maybe the pole sitter, if you ask me, was Esteban Ocon in the Haas. P4 was Charles Leclerc. P3 was Lando Norris. P2 was Max Verstappen doing a nice job to split the McLarens on with his setup. And P1, it was a lap though. New track record 140.510. That was Oscar Piastri in the other McLaren. Cody, big thoughts here in SQ qualifying.
Big thought for me was it was really interesting to see the different philosophy that went into setting up the car for the sprint race, because the weather forecast showed that we were going to get rain on Sunday. Like, it was pretty clear that was going to happen. But there was potential for good weather on Friday and Saturday. So I think a lot of the teams went into this thinking that they could try a lower downforce setup for the sprint race, and therefore for the sprint race qualifying, because it was going to be dry. They could try some different stuff. So it was really cool to see some guys like Max Verstappen and Esteban Ocon and a few of the other drivers going for this lower downforce setup. And you could really see the difference it made, because after the sprint race, everyone's getting set up again for qualifying for the main race, where they know it's going to be wet. So no one was using that low downforce setting. And it was, really interesting to see how it affected this, where everyone was placed in qualifying. But beyond that, Oscar Piastri put together an awesome lap here. He was more than 4/10 clear of Max Verstappen. So that had me going like, holy shit, like there's no way anyone's catching these guys before the end of the season. They have it locked. We've known it for a while, but yeah, monster lap from Piastri. Not so good for a couple of big names that ended up way at the back. Particularly Lewis Hamilton had a really rough time qualifying this weekend. We'll get into where he got in the regular qualifying later, but yeah, 18th, bad sprint qualifying. Kimi Antonelli couldn't really put together a representative lap, and he has been struggling quite a bit lately. So this weekend did not help that. Really hoping that he's able to get that confidence going and get himself picked back up before the end of the season.
Yeah, Mercedes are kind of blaming an update that they put on the car post-Canada, because since Canada, they've been really, really struggling. And this was, a track that they were just absolutely awesome at last year, and came out of the box, and you saw the cooler weather, and you're like, oh, that's what I even said on the preview. I said, this should be Mercedes back in the game, and no, not to be. Kimi Antonelli struggling and was pushing and just couldn't get anything else out of it. And George Russell as well, struggling and couldn't get anything else out of it. They were in the straight line speed camp, where they were actually setting at some points. This is how weird the split was in the strategies. George Russell set, I believe, in SQ2, where he gets eliminated, a purple sector 1. which is basically, all, flat out foot to the floor type
Mhm.
of speed, and didn't matter. Because he gets to sector 2 and he gives it all back, and then like 4 more tenths on top of that. And even in sector 3, actually, it was weird. It was, you would see like Russell, and then Piastri would be in the middle sector where he would make up all his lap time, and then in the third one, you'd see like another Mercedes or Max or somebody like that. So I mean, there wasn't like 3 dominant sectors across, but the middle sector proved to be where you were either going to make your hay or you were going to really struggle. And yeah, I think Mercedes have been going for some home run setups, and I don't think necessarily it came to be. And it was kind of interesting that even after the weekend, they said they're going to, take some parts off the car and go back to some older spec stuff where that they thought was working better. So, that was interesting. But yeah, Oscar Piastri out in front, great lap. The comparison, I think, to the 2021 Mercedes, I think by 7 tenths he lowers the track record. So that was not something that I was definitely anticipating. My lap times are awful in the predictions, as you'll see when we get there. Woo! But yeah, hell of a lap by him. And kudos to Max, because he made the 2 straight line thing work better than anybody else could have. Certainly a lot better than his teammate, who eventually got the same floor as Max did. Red Bull did bring some updates here, and I think you got to be pretty encouraged, actually, by what you saw, at least in qualifying trim. They're able to kind of figure out that car. Sometimes we've seen Red Bull kind of really struggle on a Friday, not so much here. Certainly on the Max side for sure. All right, so we will move into the sprint itself. Not going to play any music for this one, but not getting a good start and no start at all was Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, a water leak causing him to get pulled from the grid and not a participant. He did participate. He actually went out and did 12 laps. They fixed the water leak, but he was 3 laps down, and then he eventually retired the car. He did not finish. P19 was Franco Colapinto, P18 Nico Hulkenberg, P17 not doing much better than his qualifying form here, Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. P16 was Alex Albon, P15 was Lewis Hamilton, P14 Fernando Alonso, P13 was Lance Stroll, P12 was George Russell, P11 Yuki Tsunoda, P10 Liam Lawson, and P9 was Gabriel Bortoleto. Your points finishers in the sprint. P8 was Isaac Hadjar, P7 Ali Behrman. Good form for Haas, especially early on. P6 was Carlos Sainz. P5, Esteban Ocon, making the good qualifying form from Friday's stick. P4 was Charles Leclerc. P3 was Lando Norris. P2 was Oscar Piastri. And Max Verstappen using his setup to its fullest advantage on lap 1 and taking the victory on lap 1. And that was basically all she wrote. Taking the sprint win. Of all the sprint formats, Max has definitely won the most of them. I think this is his 10th out of.
I think they actually said on the broadcast it's his 12th.
12th, okay.
And
I couldn't remember
no
if it was 10 out of 12 or more, but it was 12.
So yeah, he is the sprint master. 10 more sprint wins than anybody else.
That's what it is. It was 10 more than anybody else combined. That's it.
That was the highlight for me, was getting to see Max do a pretty awesome move down the first straight there. They come around the first corner, and he looks like he gets a little loose, loses a little bit of ground to Oscar Piastri, which may have actually ended up helping him out, because then he was far enough back to really maximize the slipstream going up Eau Rouge and Radion and down the Kemmel Straight there. Gets a great pass on Oscar Piastri, and that was pretty much the bulk of the action for the sprint race, because then the rest of the sprint race was Max opening up a little bit of the gap during the high-speed sections, Oscar Piastri not being able to get enough out of the slipstream in the DRS to pass him, and then getting the gap really closed up during the twisty bits, and just rinse and repeat for 15 laps. It was a very small gap between Max and Oscar and Lando by the end, because Max was clearly holding up the McLarens, because they were able to catch right up to him. I mean, look, it's a gap of not even 1.5 seconds between first and third. Piastri was pretty much hanging out right there, but behind Max the entire time, but just didn't have enough to quite get it done, which did not lend well to the likelihood of Max doing very well during the Grand Prix, because you figure he's going to lose that ground as soon as there's pit stops involved. But as we're going to get into the qualifying, he didn't even get as good a shot at the beginning. But yeah, the sprint races seem to go one of two ways. There's either complete chaos or this, where nothing happens and everyone just holds station because there's not enough points on offer. I think that's the main issue I have with the sprint format, is there's just not enough of a stake in the game for teams to try anything wild and crazy. Because, I mean, look what happened. Max won the sprint race, but Oscar finished one position behind him, so he gains 1 point on Oscar. There's not enough points up for grabs there for Oscar to try anything crazy.
Yep.
Like a heartbreak up the inside, because he's going to lose out on way more if he makes a mistake. So yeah, there's just not enough in it for them to try anything crazy during the sprint. But on the other hand, it's 1/3 of the Grand Prix distance. They're offering a maximum of 1/3 of the points for taking the sprint win. So it's like, I don't really know what they could do. I like being able to see the sprint when we go to the United States Grand Prix, but it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to have it.
Well, and you look at the bigger picture in the scope of the championship. You're right. There is no motivation for Oscar to try to do a send it move, which is what it was going to take to get back beyond Max, because there's 8 different reasons that I could think of how that's going to end in tragedy or tears, and you're going to take that car that just set the track record and possibly wreck it. And there's plenty of places going up the Camel Straight or going through Eau Rouge or going through, where you can find the barriers, and your day's done and your car's wrecked, and now you're not coming back out for qualifying, which, by the way, starts in 3 hours after the start of the sprint. So you don't have time to redo anything. So there is no carrot. Once Max got by him, unless there was an obvious mistake, and I think there was like one lap where Max made a mistake coming into like the final chicane there, where Oscar got like a sniff. But even then, it was like kind of a half move. I'm like, well, I'm going to put it on the outside, and if Max is there, well, all right, fine, And you listen to the radios, and there's really not anything that anybody could really do. I mean, it is a giant DRS train, but Max has the high ground with the clean air. And there is literally not enough of a carrot to want to make anybody make a lot of moves, because qualifying for the main race is right behind, and nobody wants to take, people have seen people not be able to come out for qualifying, and then they start in the back, and you don't want to wreck your entire race due to that. But then, here's also my number one formula for how you kill an F1 race, regardless of the track. Put everybody on the exact same compounded tires and have no pit stops, because the relative pace of this grid is such that that's what you're going to get. If you don't have an obvious tire offset, there is, and you don't have a lot of motivation to try to pass. I mean, everybody beyond P10, what's the motivation for any of those guys? I mean, they're basically out there doing a long FP2 run to study tire deg at that point. So they're just going to ride around, and they'll figure out, okay, yeah, the dirty air is dirty air. It kind of sucks, but there's really nothing I can do about it. And that's what you got. You got everybody on the exact same compounded tire. And then when we get to the main race, I'm going to do my Pirelli rant, because I do not understand what they were going for on what the compounds that they brought or what they were doing. If they were trying to encourage more pit stops, you did the exact opposite. This sprint race told you that the median tire was not falling off. There was no drop off in lap time. There was no drop off in sectors. There was no cliff. It was not there. You could have, if you were trying to be aggressive, you could have put on a set of softs and see if you could have done the 15 laps, because nobody was dropping off anywhere, it looked like, on here. So yeah, it's really, really tough to do a lot of overtaking when, one, you have no motivation, and two, there's no reason to. And that sucks for all the fans that got up. I got up super early to watch it live, and I was like, All right, I get to go back to bed now.
Hey, you're more dedicated than me. I saw the start time was 5 a.m. our time, and I was like, I'll get up an hour before qualifying and I'll watch it.
We're enough into the summer where it's not quite light out by the time the sprint ended. Because I'm like, oh, I'll watch the sun come up. Nope, I didn't even get that much. So I'm like, yeah, back to it. But anyway, that was the sprint. I don't think it was, certainly not a classic by any stretch, and I don't know that it's got people clamoring for the format. I don't know if you saw the potential leak that I think it was the Dutch GP, the Zandvoort circuit, kind of sort of let out what they thought the 2026 sprint calendar was going to look like. There's some odd choices if that list is true.
I mean, I wouldn't mind a little bit of a mix-up because it seems like they've been kind of doing the sprint at the same venues, which, albeit they're the popular venues, like, I feel like Brazil, if you're going to have a sprint race, like Brazil's a good place to do it. Everyone likes Spa, so the Belgian Grand Prix is a great place to do that. I love it that they keep doing it at the U.S. Grand Prix because it means we get a little extra racing when we go. But like, if they're going to mix it up, I don't see a problem with that.
Let me see if I can pull the list here real quick.
I keep having this love-hate relationship with the sprint because sometimes you get a really good one and it's like, yeah, this is great. And then the next 3 times you have a sprint, it's boring as hell. And you're like, why are we doing this again?
Yeah. So here was the list that, this is not official. It has not been announced. I am not verifying it, but apparently the Zandvoort circuit got so excited that it got selected for a sprint that it couldn't contain itself and let out on its Instagram that the following would be your venues for it. China, we've had it there before. Miami, yay, we get that again. Canada, don't know how that makes sense. And then Singapore. And that's the one that makes me go, what? If that's what it is. And along with Zandvoort. So those would be your potential sprint venues. The Singapore one makes me almost want to throw things. Like, you take the most physical of physical races and you're going to make these guys do it twice in that heat. And when are you going to do it? You have to screw up your calendar if you're going to do it at Singapore, because the only way that works is it's still going to be daylight. So yeah. I don't know if I believe this yet, because it almost is so far-fetched it doesn't make sense.
The Singapore one definitely seems really out there, because they go out of their way to try to make sure that there are no sessions in the daylight, because It's awful. It's so flipping hot. And on top of that, like, Singapore is notoriously difficult to pass at anyway. So like you said, you put them out there on a sprint where everyone's on the same compound of tires and just nothing's going to happen anyway. It's going to be like a parade.
Right. So I don't know.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I'm hoping that list is, I'm really hoping that is not official. I didn't tweet it. I didn't put it out there because I'm like, boy, I hope that this is wrong. But if that is anywhere close to right, like Zandvoort, I could see it making sense, especially if there's rain and there's some tricky conditions. That could be kind of interesting. You didn't have rain at this track. That has always made the sprints a lot more interesting if there's a change of tire or there's a pit stop. You talked about what could they do? Well, they could do what F2 does, invert the top 10 and actually give more points out. Where like P1 gets, and you do points all the way through the top 10, but you do it, P1 gets like 15 points, P2 gets, I think it's 15, 12, and there's a whole sliding scale down to 1 for P10. So that's something they can consider, but it doesn't seem to want to do it. Nobody wants to do inverted grids. I'm not a big fan of that anyway, because then what's the point of the qualifying? But if you're going to do SQ qualifying, you might as well have them line up where they actually belong on the grid. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, this one did not very ring totally true here. But all right, enough of the sprint. We will move on to our main qualifying, which saw. Here we go. All right, going out in P20 in the main qualifying. The setup went away from the Aston Martins and went away from the Aston Martins big time. Lance Stroll goes out in P20, and Fernando Alonso goes out in P19. Ouch. Still no better for Kimi Antonelli. He did not improve over the course of this weekend. He goes out in P18. Another ouch. P17 was Franco Colapinto. P16 out in Q1 again for Lewis Hamilton and the Ferrari. The new updates clearly not working for him, at least in qualifying trim, at least not here. P15 was Carlos Sainz. P14, Nico Hulkenberg. P13 was Pierre Gasly. And P12, the Haas's literally took the arrow idea that we were talking about and split them. Ollie Behrman went straight line and gets P12. Esteban Ocon went sector 2 and gets P11. A difference of a tenth. So go figure that one out. P10, Gabby Bortoletto, again putting it in Q3. Well done again there, sir. P9 was Liam Lawson. P8, Isaac Hadjar. P7, welcome back to the top 10 other Red Bull car and Yuki Tsunoda. Where has that been? Look at that. P6 was George Russell. P5 was Alex Albon. P4 was Max Verstappen, going away from his awesome qualifying setup in the sprint format because he was afraid that they were worried about the rain. P3 was Charles Leclerc, who actually jumped Max Verstappen at the end. P2 was Oscar Piastri. And P1, pipping his teammate and getting the momentum at least early, was Lando Norris in the McLaren. A 140.562, not quite the track record, but really, really close. All right, big thoughts here in the main qualifying.
So again, Lewis Hamilton having a really hard time putting together good qualifying in Spa. And he actually had a time that would have put him up into Q3, but it got deleted for very minor track limits. Very unfortunate for him. It was going actually through like Radion just very, very briefly had all four wheels beyond track limits. So bit of a rough one for him. But that does take him out. I'm sorry, that was that prevented him from going to Q1
to Q2.
Yeah, Q1 to Q2. So he got knocked out in Q1. Kimi Antonelli really looking, I would say, even worse in the regular qualifying because at least in the sprint qualifying, he didn't really get a truly representative lap in because he had an off. This time, though, he had a regular lap, and it just was not good enough. Not nearly close to George Russell. So Kimi Antonelli still having to figure out some things with the car. We know he's got it. He's had some great performances so far this year. He's just got to find that again. The Aston Martin's really, really bad. It's bad seeing Fernando Alonso starting on the back row. So they got to figure out something with the setup. They're probably not putting any stock left into these cars for the rest of the year. So we'll just have to see how that progresses with them. And yeah, I was disappointed that Max was all the way down in fourth. I guess I wasn't really surprised. I guess it was kind of cool for Charles Leclerc that he got to, start all the way up in third, showing like, maybe there is something to these Ferrari upgrades that they brought for this Grand Prix. But nobody's got anything for the McLarens. And at this point, I think we're kind of seeing what we're going to see for the rest of the season now is that we're on the back half of the season. They're still well off and away the best car, perhaps even more dominant than they were at the start of the season, and no one's going to be bringing any major upgrades to the cars for the rest of the season. And that's just pretty much all she wrote, I think, is that we're going to see a lot more McLaren 1-2s or both McLarens on the podium for the rest of the season. And it's really just going to go down to Lando versus Oscar because nobody is close enough to them at this point in the season that they would even try to bring major upgrades, even if we weren't going into a major rule change next season.
Yeah, I mean, the strange thing about it is, everyone was saying, oh my God, the flexi wing thing is going to totally kill them. Well, since Spain, they've actually gotten better. If anything, it's been the other way around where it's like they've actually figured it out and said, okay, well, you take that little toy away and we'll just do it the way you all do it. That's the end of that. Yeah, I mean, clearly the best car in Sector 2, which is where they were definitely making their lap time. I mean, the Lando Norris's Sector 2 was just absolutely insane. I mean, Oscar put together a heck of a good one, and Lando went like 2/10 quicker than that. And that ultimately is what ended up doing it, because Oscar got him in both Sectors 1 and Sector 3. Once Max decided to put the higher downforce setup on, that was pretty much, I think, all she wrote for qualifying, because I'm like, where he was making his lap time was in Sector 1. He was getting a big advantage, trying to mitigate that in the second sector, and then trying to come home really, really strong in the third sector. And he couldn't necessarily do that once he put on the higher downforce wing. So, yeah, that was pretty much kind of all she wrote at the front. For Aston Martin, their big thing is they are not good in straight lines. They like tight and twisty little circuits like that. They'll probably do better in Hungary, but they're going to struggle here. Look for them to struggle again big time in Monza, because what they're trying to get out of the car is basically what they can get in the twisty bits, and they realize they're down on straight line speed, and there really not a whole lot that they can really do about it at this point. Surprising, the thing that happened to Lewis Hamilton, we didn't actually talk about it, but Oscar Piastri almost had the same thing happen to him in the sprint qualifying. He just barely made SQ3 because his fast lap in SQ2 got deleted for that exact same spot at track limits. And I think he only advanced by like 400ths over Liam Lawson. So it could have been a dramatically different sprint and a dramatically different sprint qualifying had that happened or gone that way. But not to be, same kind of rule violation for Lewis Hamilton. It is just a smidge that he's off. So not a whole lot in it there, but probably would have made Q3, probably would have been, I think, probably 8th or 7th or something like that at least. But he gave himself a lot of work to do, definitely heading into Sunday. All right, so we will now turn to the Sunday race. And the rain that had been predicted definitely showed up. The F3 race did not happen. That was completely washed out. The F2 race did get going, but after some delays and after some safety cars. And then we got to the F1 race where it had rained on the formation laps or on the recon laps, so everybody was definitely going to be on wet tires. And we thought we had a window. At least we definitely thought we had a window. We got going at the same time that we were normally supposed to, but we never completed the formation lap because about halfway through, they red flagged it and said, nope, conditions are not good enough to go racing in. Not necessarily a tire able to touch the track type of thing, but a visibility thing. And then that, I did understand the call, at least, if nothing else, because you're going up that Camel Straight. You could, if you were in anywhere other than the first two cars, you could not see anything. It was very, very difficult to see. But I was also annoyed that they didn't do a couple extra laps behind the safety car and see if, the Hoovers that are the F1 cars, which are the best way to get water off of a circuit that I know, could actually do what they're engineered to do. So, Cody, you were probably sitting at home watching, trying to wait for this race to go. What was your thought on the odd timing of the red flag and that they didn't do anything there?
From my personal perspective, it was very frustrating because I had a window to be able to watch the race live, and as soon as it was delayed, I was like, I'm gonna have to watch it tonight. So from that perspective, a little frustrating. When they did take it out on the track, I understood the visibility issue, and it was really nasty spray. The ground effect nature of these cars means that they just suck all that water right off the track and shoot it out the back, so it makes it really hard to see, even compared to previous generations of Formula One cars. But at the same time, it wasn't like insanely deluge wet, and yeah, I figure a few trips around the track and you start to generate a little bit of a drying line, and then maybe it's easier to see, and then maybe you get something going. And they delayed it for quite a long time, to the point where when they went back out finally to get the race going again, and even then they went under a safety car for a few laps, and they decided, to hell with the standing start, we're just going to start this one under the safety car. It really wasn't even that bad of a spray at that point, and it didn't take them that long to get to conditions where they activated DRS and everyone went over to the dry tires. So I don't know. I have conflicting feelings on this because on one hand, this track is dangerous. It has a history of danger and fatal accidents, and that going up Eau Rouge and Radion and down the Kemmel Strait is a really high speed section, and if you get it wrong, it's a really nasty accident. So, like, part of me understands that you don't want to take extreme risks if you don't have to. You don't want anyone getting hurt. But there is still a show to be had, and we really like the wet races. It's a good show. So I guess it's really hard to find that fine line between what is an acceptable risk to put on the show. Yeah. What ended up happening is we got a longer version of the sprint race because it dried out so quickly by the time they got going, and then it was just pretty boring.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's my working theory. And my working theory is I think the race director, Rui Marquez, not Eduardo. Eduardo's doing WEC now. Rui Marquez got a little spooked by what he saw in both, I think, the F3 and the F2 races. Because in the F3 race, they tried to send the cars out, and they were going to do the thing where they were going to we're going to run a couple laps behind the safety car and see where we are. And those drivers are the least experienced. They have no time in the wet. They don't practice in the wet. They don't really have an intermediate tire to go off of. And two cars spun out just trying to run behind the safety car. Both needed help to get out, and they had to red flag it anyway. And then they realized, oh, wait, this is too wet. And then they tried to wait it out, and the rain never stopped, and therefore we didn't have an F3 race. So I think he gets spooked by that. And then we go to the F2 race where kind of the same thing happens. And another guy literally got stuck on a curb right when they were about to get going. And then they had to delay that. They had to throw a red flag and to clear his car out of the way. So I think he's, if you're there the whole day and you're watching it and you're realizing the track wasn't, until the sun came out, the track was not drying out very much at all, if at all. And you had a window where you could see that there was more rain coming on the radar. But if your conditions are such that you think you can run, you should run. And then if the conditions change, that's when we would stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be what makes sense to me. I'm fine with, even if it's 4 or 5 laps behind the safety car, the first run, then we see, oh, there's a whole buttload of rain more coming, or it starts again, okay, then we stop. That would it would have made sense. Or we at least make an attempt to say, okay, well, we're going to start the race. We'll do the rolling start because we're not going to get both sides of the track equally dry for the standing start, which was something they were took way too much time trying to figure out. I mean, both sides, there's 10 drivers, they have to deal with it. It's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Somebody's going to get disadvantaged. You can't be fully fair in that situation. There's just no way to do it unless you want to take, a sweeper and let people, go out and try to treat their grid spots, which you don't want to let anybody do. So because of that, you ended up kind of getting where you ended up, which was a long delay. The sun literally came out, and then they did the 6 laps behind the safety car, and then they finally decided to get going. And by the time they finally decided to get going, yeah, you're right. It's like, now you're in the countdown to where's the crossover for slicks, because not only were the full wets not even needed or not even seen, why do we even bother to transport that tire around the world is beyond me at this point. Nobody uses it. We've not put enough development into that tire to make it viable in conditions like this. This is where that tire should be shining, and it's not. And because we don't want it to be, apparently, is the answer, because we don't want to spend the money to develop it. Somebody doesn't want to spend the money, whether it's Pirelli, F1, FOM, the tracks. Somebody's not willing to spend the money to actually make this. We could do wet races. Other series have done wet races. They also have cars that don't kick up a cloud of water every time it goes by. I mean, the amount of spray that the F1 cars kick up is insane. And it hangs there. And there, again, there's other formulas that make it work. But Anyway, that's kind of my rant on the start of the race. I was disappointed along with everybody else. It was rain delay theater. I was trying to do my best to keep people informed on social media as I saw it. They did do a very long, lengthy clearing of each sector of the track before they even got going. So when everyone was like, oh, they should have been going for 20 minutes, they started their startup procedure right around the time you and I would have thought, hey, maybe they should go. But that procedure, because it's such a long track, took like 20 minutes to complete. They would literally go, you watched it on the timing. You'd go from, it was the red flag comes off, and then it says double yellow sector 1, clear in sector 1, double yellow sector 2, clear in sector 2. And they did it. And there's 16 of them at Spa. So it took them a long time. So even like the criticism of we should have gone 20 minutes earlier, yeah, that's true. But I don't know that anybody anticipated 20 minutes of them clearing their own track to make it viable to go. I think it was a whole lot of things came together at the wrong time. I'm not excusing it. I was annoyed along with everybody else. Should have got going. But anyway, when we did get going, passing became very, very, very tough to do. We'll start with our back markers. Other than Lewis Hamilton, who decided to show everybody what could be done, your back markers for this race are in P20 was Isaac Hadjar, the only car to be lapped here at Spa. P19, Franco Colapinto. P18, it started so well for Carlos Sainz. It did not end well for Carlos Sainz. That's as far as he could get. P17 was Fernando Alonso. P16, a little bit better. At least he's off the back row here. Kimi Antonelli, but no points on the day. P15 was Esteban Ocon. Obviously, we learned what setup on the Haas car didn't work. That was that one. P14 was Lance Stroll. And P13, Yuki Tsunoda, who I think has a bone to pick with his team after this one, and kind of sort of right, especially on some of the team radio, because I wasn't sure what Red Bull was doing there, but only good enough for P13. Cody, big thoughts here in the back markers.
Oh, that it was a bad time to be a rookie, I guess. We did see pretty poor performances from Franco Colapinto and Kimi Antonelli. Isaac Hadjar was running up there for a while, and by the time that things changed for him, I was so bored with the race last night that I was starting to nod off a little. So forgive me, I don't actually know what caused him to fall that far back. If he
pitted a second time. They boxed him. He was one of the few that took a second stop.
So that was actually a big thing. You know, I know this doesn't necessarily have to do with the back marker specifically, but as you said before, they found out at some point the medium tire was actually going to last. So, you know, a lot of drivers that were able to take the medium to the end of the race did. So
16 of them, as I believe. I think it was P1 to P15, with one exception. We'll talk about the one exception. We're all on medium tires.
You had your wet race to start, so you didn't really have to use a second compound of tires. So everyone pretty much went to the mediums that they could, and then they took those two in the race because they weren't degrading. But yeah, I guess the few that did come in for the additional stop ended up losing out on it. I clearly picked the wrong Williams to have a good weekend, because I'm pretty sure I picked Carlos Sainz for like P9 or something like that, and he did not have a good time. Meanwhile, his teammate really, really did. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, Esteban Ocon, unfortunately, he had a couple fun moments on track, I think, with battles, but unfortunately not really able to convert anything to points finish. And then, yeah, Yuki Tsunoda started to have a little bit of higher hopes when he had the good qualifying, but unfortunately he was not able to convert that into a points finish either.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting that nobody decided to do the double stack when the crossover point had come. McLaren didn't do it with Oscar and Lando. Red Bull didn't do it with Max and Yuki. And Yuki was not a happy camper about it. I don't know if you've seen the radio, but I did get a chance to watch. I think the F1 puts out like the best of team radio at the end of these things. Mm-hmm. One of the advantages of recording the next day. Yuki Tsunoda's radio was pretty damn spicy, because he's on the radio going, I'm coming in, box, 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 no response. Box, no response. Gets to the bus stop, and still no response. And then, then the cuss words came out. So I think, Fiery Yuki was back in the car. He clearly wanted to come in along with everybody else. They didn't. He went out on a second lap or an extra lap on the intermediates, and that kind of screwed over his day. Could have possibly been a double points finish, I think, if they not done that, but not enough in it, I guess, to want to do the double stack there. So that was the end of Yuki's competitive day. But the qualifying form was better. They did eventually get him on the same floor as Max Verstappen. He should have the rest of the updates coming through that were on Max's car in Hungary. So they definitely helped a lot in the qualifying. So we'll have to see. Maybe there's something there. It all starts with one. It's got to start somewhere. Anyway, I guess we'll move into our midfield and our podium because it's all kind of the same from here on out. The midfield saw P12, Nico Hulkenberg, P11. The better Haas setup goes to Ali Behrman, but not good enough to get into the points. P10 was Pierre Gasly, who yet again gets Alpine a much-needed point. P9 was Gabby Bortoletto, Kick Sauber scoring points consistently here. Good for him. P8 was Liam Lawson. P7 was Lewis Hamilton, rallying from, I think, was it P18 to P7, a heck of a day. He was making overtakes in the wet and timed the crossover perfectly and gets up to P7 as a result of it. P6 was Alex Albon in the Williams. Good points for that team after some struggles. P5 was George Russell. And P4 ends up being Max Verstappen, who could not get past Charles Leclerc after the switch over to the dry tire. So that was that battle. And P2, Lando Norris, who got passed by Oscar Piastri on the first lap, could not close the gap enough to put enough pressure on Oscar late to make the tire delta that he had built up, because Lando was actually the only guy in the top 15 to try the hard tire, thinking it was going to go all the way to the end, thinking everyone else would have to box again. But no, the medium tire proved to be too robust for everybody's liking. The medium tire goes all the way to the end. I think it was something like 25, 26 laps or something they ended up on that tire. So Oscar Piastri got a 9-second gap and kept it all the way. Lando did make a couple of mistakes that didn't help his cause. A couple times he lost some time. Did get the gap down to about 3 seconds at the end, but not to be for him. And that means Oscar's lead in the championship goes back up to 16 points. So that's kind of where we stand now. Cody, big thoughts here in the midfield and the podium.
I guess we'll start with the podium. I was excited for what could have been a really good battle between the two McLarens. And on the first lap, it was really good pass by Oscar on Lando. Pretty much, like I said before, a repeat of what we saw in the sprint race. To get that really good slipstream down the Kemmel Straight and turn that into a pass. That was really the only time they were able to make that work up front. I did appreciate the Lando going for a different strategy and going on the hard tire. What I found to be frustrating is that there was a little too many mistakes for that to actually work out, because at the end, yes, the medium tire was working, but it was definitely degrading and you couldn't get as much out of it at the end. And it seemed clear to me that the hard tire had the stronger performance there at the end, given similar tire life. But for one thing, they made a mistake at Lando's pit stop onto the hard, so he had a slow pit stop where he lost out some. And then, I don't know if he was just pushing too hard, but he did have a couple of unfortunate lockups that cost him, a second here, a second there. And, maybe the gap there at the end, the 3.5 seconds isn't truly representative, because maybe Oscar was taking it easy during the last couple laps there. But it did seem like that there was a chance that Lando could maybe have closed up the gap enough to make it competitive at the end. And it's just too many mistakes cost seconds here and there that pretty much took any chances away from him.
Yeah, that La Source hairpin is, I think, one of Lando's, overall worst corners. If there's a corner where I think he struggles, it's there. It's like Bahrain turn 10, which is that off camber hairpin. If there's a racecraft thing that Lando doesn't like. It's those really slow hairpin type turns. And it's all about actually you go faster by not pushing as hard. And when you're Lando and you're trying to get every tenth of a second out of it, and he was getting the tenths of a second out in a lot of the twisty bit sectors, it's really hard to mentally get there, I guess. And he was just struggling a lot with that hairpin. The first lap, he had a little wobble that enabled Piastri to get right on his tail. Brilliant move, no DRS necessary there. And fair move to Oscar Piastri going on around the outside. Lando did cover the inside, did what I suggested, get to the inside. He at least did that. But Oscar just had way too much straight line speed there, and the slipstream was so pronounced that Lando really couldn't do anything there. But after that, the slow pit stop didn't help for sure. And then when Lando finally got to within about 4 or 5 seconds where you could see Oscar on the onboard, I don't know why the pit wall decided to give him a engine mode change going down that straight, going into his worst corner, where it's like, don't distract him going into the worst corner, and you give him an engine mode change, and then he has the lockup that cost him like 1.2 seconds with 2 laps to go, and that's the end. That was it. Any hope you had for any sort of a grandstand finish kind of went out the door. I didn't throw my hat, but I did kind of hit my table like, oh, well, that's the end of that. And okay, fine. This is where we're going to finish. But be happy, Drew. Come on, it's a 1-2, dang it. But anyway. Yeah, what?
So we did see a little bit of, going on to some of the other drivers, we did see kind of a repeat, Max being on the other end of what he was dishing out during the sprint race, because at least during the wet weather part of the race where they were all on the inters, it seemed pretty clear that Max had more pace than Charles Leclerc, but it was the same thing where Charles would pull away a little bit during the fast sections, and then you get in the twisty bits, and Max would catch back up to him, but couldn't quite get enough to get a move done. He almost looked like maybe he was going to have it at one point, couldn't quite get there, and then when they went over to the dry tires, it seemed like the Ferrari had better pace at that point, so they were pretty much stationed at that point. Charles gets a nice podium out of it, which is really good for him. I would say that the stars in terms of like excitement during the main race were definitely Lewis Hamilton, who made a great comeback from where he started. He was pretty much the only one getting like any fun passes done on track. So he comes back to finish 7th, which is pretty respectable based on where he started. Liam Lawson gets a few points. Gabriele Bortoletto gets a few points. So fun to see the Racing Bulls and Sauber getting points. They're actually pretty much just about neck and neck in the constructors. So it's good to see both of those teams getting some amount of points to keep that interesting. And then lastly, Alex Albon had great qualifying. Pretty much turned it into about as good a finish during the Grand Prix as I think he could have hoped for. Even Lewis Hamilton couldn't get the move done on him by the end. So, great pace from him. Good points for Williams. They really needed a good finish because they've had it pretty rough lately. Yeah. So it was good to see them kind of get back on the horse there.
Yeah, I mean, the battle for P6 as we come down the stretch is going to be a thing because you have 4 teams who could legit get there. And Alpine, yes, they're in P10 in the constructors, but they are the highest scoring P10 last place constructor ever. They have 20 points on the board now with Pierre Gasly's single point here. And that has like demolished the old record. I think the old record was like 18. They already have 20 and there's still a long season left to go.
Yeah, 11 races left.
Yeah. And that team could, do a shock thing. And, we've seen weird stuff happen before, like the double podium in Brazil last year, which, could mean millions and millions of dollars. So, I mean, we already kind of saw it, with Hulkenberg getting on a podium. Nobody saw that one coming. Certainly not us. And, Blam now, Kick Sauber are right in the mix for that P6 as well. So there are going to be battles afoot. They're probably not going to be as much out in front other than, like you kind of said, I think it's going to be Lando v. Oscar. And yet another situation where it was convenient, I think, for the McLaren brass to say, well, we're not going to double stack because we find an excuse not to double stack. And, here's this nice 9-second gap. And we put Lando on a different tire and we'll see if that comes together. And, we're not all that upset that, they never really had ding dong there, kind of at the end. I'm sure that was fine. We're enough with Zach to be happy there. But anyway, it was not the banger that we hoped for. Sometimes this is just kind of how the cookie crumbles. But anyway, so that's the Belgian GP. We'll take a quick break here. We'll come back. We'll re-rack. We'll tell you what that did to all of the standings in the drivers and in the constructors. And then we'll open it up to your takes on what you saw this weekend. The fan email segment, we've got some wonderful thoughts here. We'll hand out some awards real quick. We'll talk about predictions. Both of us actually not too bad on this one. We definitely both scored. It was a tight situation. Comes down actually to some of the sprint stuff and the bonus picks. So we will talk about the prediction results. And then we'll set the stage for Hungary because we got one more and then a summer break. So come on back. You won't want to miss it. All right, welcome back on in. This is season 7, episode number 25 of the Outlap F1 podcast. And somehow we managed to talk for almost 40 minutes about the Belgian Grand Prix. So that's talent, dang it. Welcome on back in. That's what you got. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. We just wrapped up the Belgian Grand Prix, the good, the bad, and some of the weird. But anyway, we're going to take a look at the standings, what this did after this round of the World Championship. Cody, if you want to take the drivers, I will handle the teams.
Right. Oscar Piastri opens up his championship lead just a little bit more after this race. Well-deserved victory. So he's in first place with McLaren at 266 points, and Lando Norris still in second place, 250 points. And Lando has a nice, big, healthy 65-point gap back to Max Verstappen at this point. Max in third. For Red Bull at 185. George Russell in fourth place, not having the greatest of weekends himself. Fourth for Mercedes at 157 points. Charles Leclerc, however, got a pretty good heap of points out of the Grand Prix. He's in fifth for Ferrari at 139 points, which puts him 30 points ahead of his teammate Lewis Hamilton in sixth place at 109. Kimi Antonelli, unfortunately, been struggling a bit lately. It's a pretty good gap from Lewis back to Kimi. Kimi in seventh, and the other Mercedes at 63 points. Not really too far ahead of Alex Albon at this point, who did have a pretty good haul of points this time out. Eighth place for Williams at 54, so just a 9-point gap between a Mercedes and Williams. It's pretty crazy. If you look back a few years, you would think it was absolutely unthinkable. Nico Hulkenberg still in ninth place after his big points that he got from that podium. Ninth place for Kick Sauber, sitting on 37 points. And then Esteban Ocon in the first of the two Haas cars, holding on to 10th place at 27 points. So pretty good mix of cars here in the top 10. You got McLaren's, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and then you got Williams, Sauber, and Haas, each with a car in the top 10 as well.
Yeah, I mean, and the constructor standings, especially in the bottom half of the table here, are quite fascinating the more you think about it. But up front, McLaren, Mercedes are well clear. They are almost not quite double. Well, yeah, a little bit more than double. Their closest competitor at this point, they're up to 516 points. I must be hallucinating. My God, I never thought back. If you put me in 2015, the year where they couldn't, do 3 laps in a Honda engine, did I ever think we would get here? I'd have called you a damn liar, but here we are. My God. Damn.
It took 10 years.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But you got to ride, like I said, we got to ride this roller coaster. Got to enjoy the good because there's been plenty of bad. P2 is Ferrari. They are up to 248 points on the season. They re-solidify their P2 position because Mercedes did not have a good weekend. I don't think they even scored a point this weekend, or they did with Russell. So they go up to 220 points on the season. P4 is Red Bull. They check in with 192 points on the season. P5 is Williams. They are up to 70 points on the season, and that's good for them because P6, Kick Sauber, continue to rack up the points here. They're up to 43 points. Those 2 points for Gabby Bortoletto were very significant because the Racing Bulls in P7 are right on their tail now, and they check in with 41 points. Only 5 points in front of P8, Aston Martin, and 1 point above P9, Haas, who check Aston Martin with 36, Haas with 35, and P10 is Alpine. Like I said, they're last in the constructors, but they've scored 20 points. So they will continue every point they will break their own record until they get out of P10, if they get out of P10. But that's possible. I mean, that's the thing. So nothing is in stone. Pierre Gasly's wringing the neck out of that car, especially in qualifying lately.
Yeah, only 8 points between 6th place and 9th place at this point in the season. So definitely going to be a game of inches.
Yep. Yeah. And I will say I give Haas a lot of credit. They were bad in Brazil, and they took their little break and they went to work and they figured some stuff out on that car, and they definitely showed a lot better here. So if that can be a harbinger of things to come for them, they're going to put pressure on Aston Martin, on Racing Bulls. Kick Sauber actually have things to defend now because of all of their good work and their good results this season as well. All right. So you've heard our takes on the Belgian Grand Prix. Now we're going to open it up to your takes on the weekend. It's a fan email segment. We've got a lot of our regulars here. Good comments here, stuff to react to. Cody, our first one comes from Mr. Dave Doherty, who's back and with us this weekend. So what does he have to say? What do we got?
All right. Thanks, Dave, for your email. And he says, "Hi, team. Well, I'm grateful that we didn't get a repeat of the 2021 race delay, which was a complete joke. But McLaren are absolutely powerful, and this looks very much like McLaren's year. I'll second that. Red Bull amazed me in the sprint race. Verstappen has still got it. What are your thoughts on Red Bull from this weekend?" I mean, Red Bull, specifically Max Verstappen, are doing, I think, about as well as you could hope for them with the car that they brought this year. They're already running into problems with the car last year. That's why Max only got 2 wins from like the second 2/3 of the year. And they didn't do enough to improve the car. And the fact, I mean, you see that Red Bull is in 4th in the constructors. So the fact that Max has 2 Grand Prix wins and a sprint win out of this season, I think is pretty successful for him. He's got 4 poles. He's got as many poles as Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri at this point in the season, which I think is pretty amazing as well. Unfortunately, he hasn't gotten all the wins out of all those poles, but that's just what he's dealing with. So, yeah, Max definitely still has it. I still truly believe that Max is one of the, if not the best drivers that's out there. It's just he doesn't have the car to put up a great fight at this point. That McLaren car is so off in the distance, and it's not like they've got shabby drivers either. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris are extremely talented, so the fact that they've got a good car under them now, it means that they're able to capitalize on what they got. So I definitely think they deserve it. It's just that I just wish that my driver was up there fighting them. Other than that, yeah, you never want to see what you saw in 2021. To me, it's really kind of too bad that you had that super fantastic season, and then you've got that sham of a race kind of stuck right in the middle of it. Fortunately, if you took out the points from that race entirely, it wouldn't have made a difference in the championship, which I think is kind of a good thing, because had it made a difference, everyone would be putting a bigger asterisk on that championship for Max than they already do. I think maybe that even factors into why they delayed this race for so long too, because they're not wanting to get to a point where they're taking the cars out for a few laps to explore. They're technically going into the actual race distance, and then they figure out this race isn't going to happen, and then they got to do some kind of weird half points award thing again. I think they really don't ever want that to happen again. So maybe they were just wanting to make absolutely sure that we were going to get a good race in. But hey.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about the whole start was, and again, can we get people to let the broadcasters know what the actual rules are? Because it's hilarious to listen to the difference between the team radio, where they're actually talking to the guys on the grid, and then the broadcast. The race clock only starts upon completion of a formation lap. They never completed it. So therefore, the 3-hour clock never started. They kept saying that thing was running down. No, it wasn't. The 2-hour clock and the 3-hour clock hadn't started. So we just had It didn't start until they came back out and they opened the pit lane the second time. But regardless, it's just one of the frustrating things about whenever we do weird FIA stuff, nobody knows what the rule is, including the people bringing you the coverage. So it makes everybody seem and react dumber because nobody knows what's going on. But anyway, I digress. And that's why I try to tweet the stuff out that I do, because I'm trying to tell people what's actually trying to happen during that thing, because there's a lot of weird information out there and people make assumptions based on it and all sorts of weird stuff. But anyway, in terms of what Red Bull did, I thought they did a great job. I mean, of setting up the car for the sprint. Like, they knew that their best bet to get points out of this weekend or to get a result was going to be the sprint. They knew what they were doing. It made sense. Lauren Mekies came in and actually did something that made total sense to me. Set up that car, put it, get the Monza rear wing back out, get that British GP rear wing back out, put it back on that car, and let Max go do his thing. And it worked. And kudos for him. He split some McLarens in qualifying. And then, just a great move. And that's how, if you're trying to win a sprint, that's how you should go do it. Get the guy on lap one and don't give him any reason to come back at you. Great job. What Max is doing with that car, the fact that that car is even as competitive as it is, you just look at the other side. Liam Lawson has scored more points in the V-Carb than Yuki Tsunoda has in the other Red Bull. And if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does. Red Bull know that they've made mistakes, and that's why the head of Christian Horner is rolling somewhere in the factory right now. Not yet out of the factory yet, and that's why we had all that stuff go on. So I do think they will understand what they did. I don't know if they're in a development path where they can change anything for next year. Obviously, this set of regs, I think they're going to get, that's probably where Max is going to be. He's going to be like splitting the McLarens, who will get a pole position every now and then. If he can get his conditions, he may win another couple of races. There are some tracks I think he could definitely win. I look at places like Singapore, places that aren't like power dependent or super aero dependent. Like if he can like get pole in like a place like Singapore where it's really hard to overtake, that's where he could win.
Fortunately, Singapore is like Max's kryptonite. It's the only race on the calendar
that he's never won.
Yeah.
Well, I would think like Zandvoort, where he's got the home support, but I mean, McLaren went really well last year. So I mean, we'll see. But I do think there's going to be opportunities where he will probably. I think he's going to win at least one more this season before we're done. But I mean, in terms of the McLarens, I mean, like I said, I have to be like hallucinating that I'm watching these guys, and you just watch the gap on P3, and I'm like, 4 seconds, 6 seconds, 8 seconds. I'm like, this is just them two now. It's like, we don't really have to worry. Just don't fuck it up, and you're going to be fine. And that's pretty much what happened. And even though they had a slow pit stop, they had enough of a gap on P3 that it really didn't matter. And the only frustrating thing was, Lando made those couple mistakes and kind of prevented us to have a real grandstand finish there. But again, like I said, this is a track that Lando this was his kryptonite. If that's the worst we're going to have is a P2, that's still pretty damn good. So I'll take it.
Definitely. And for what it's worth, I'm excited to see, I love Max, and yes, I would love to see him win, but it's also kind of exciting to see someone else actually going to win the championship.
Like if Oscar wins, this is the hilarity part. If Oscar wins, he's going to go from 81 to 1. So that means he's going to go from the last car on, like when you go to F1 TV, you got to scroll all the way down to get to his onboard. He'll be the first one next year if he wins.
He's got a fantastic shot at it too. Thank you again, Dave, for your email. Our next one comes in from Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, well, that was an interesting race once we got started. Sadly, Lando lost it at the start. Turns out the medium would last, but it was worth doing something different, and it made things a lot more interesting. Barring the McLarens, there wasn't too much to say. Besides that, Lewis Hamilton, I voted for him for driver of the day as his overtakes were pretty good. Alonso watch, God, that Aston Martin is a dreadful car, but it seemed to be extremely bad at this circuit. More wind tunnel time for next season for Adrian. Yeah. Sauber watch, great timing at pit stops for Gabriel, and he got good points out of that finish. Nico shouldn't have pitted for the second time as he lost in position, and it turns out the medium did last. Finally, there was a comment on Sky about if this was the mecca of F1 tracks. For me, it's Monza. My dad says Silverstone, but I was wondering what you guys think is the mecca of F1. Oh boy! All right, I'm going to start with that.
It's a loaded
Final
question.
Mm-hmm. I think when I think of a Formula One track, I usually think of Spa because it's got a good combination of history and the sport. It's in a beautiful place. The cars look really cool going around it. You got some of the most iconic turns and sections that you see in Formula One. So I think that's probably my go-to for what I would think of. The only tarnishing aspect of it is lately it just doesn't really deliver exciting races, and that's really what you want out of Formula One or any type of racing, right? You want it to be exciting. So, it's exciting for qualifying. It's cool to watch the cars there. It's a beautiful track and a beautiful place, but it doesn't quite deliver on the races at the moment. So, if I had to go with something that has the history, the good on-track spectacle, and makes for actually exciting races, I would probably actually lean more towards Silverstone at this point. I think, maybe it's not exactly in an ugly place. It's not like, not like it's out in the
big
middle of the
field out in the country.
Yeah. Oh, I only bring that up because, every time we go to Coda, I sit there and I go, man, this is a cool track. I love being here. There's nothing to see here. You're out in the Texas, desert pretty much. It isn't exactly the most picturesque place like you get at some other tracks like Spa or man, I'm just drawing a big fat blank here because that's the only one I've been to. Austria. Austria to me is probably the most beautiful area around where the track is at. But I would probably say that for me, it's between Silverstone and Spa for the mecca of F1 tracks.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to throw me into a corner and say pick what's the most historic F1 track, I would lean towards Monza just because of the history, the fact that both Silverstone and Monza they're 1 and 1A, and I think what formula we're in kind of will determine and can kind of slip the scale one way or the other for me. With this formula, I think the better racing is in Silverstone right now, given this formula, because you just kind of see how the different types of corners it leads to good overtaking up possibilities. You saw, Sky puts it on their stuff all the time. The three going in, Perez, Hamilton, and Leclerc going in, and Hamilton sweeps by 2 of them and then takes the position. So I'll give it that one. The other one I would say, believe it or not, is going to be one that's off the calendar, and that's Nürburgring. To me, there's a ton of history with that race. There's been a lot of heritage with that race, and it kind of just sucks that we don't have a German Grand Prix on the calendar for a country that has as much auto sport history and a great CV as Germany does. The fact that we don't have a race kind of sucks. We also don't have a French GP, which kind of annoys me too. I'm not saying I want to go back to Le Castellier by any stretch. I'd rather go back to Magny-Cours, but yeah, I mean, so right now I would probably say Monza, given everything else.
And just in case anyone, before we move on from this, in case anyone gets offended that I didn't mention like Brazil, Brazil for me just doesn't have quite the same level of history, but it is always delivering fantastic racing and on-track action, and it's a cool one to see the cars go around. A lot of really unique parts of that track too. So I would definitely put Brazil easily in my top 5. Just doesn't have the same history aspect of it.
Well, I would, if you're saying what's your ideal calendar, Brazil should always be the last race. That should be your title decider, because there's so much that can happen there. It can flip stuff around. No offense to the good people of Abu Dhabi who literally raised it from nothing and spent billions of dollars to make that track, but Brazil should be your capstone of your season, for sure. So I guess I'm Monza, Silverstone a close second. I would give the Nürburgring, the classic Nürburgring, a place to go see. I wish we could run there again. And then, probably Brazil again in the top 5 for sure.
Mm-hmm. Some other points here from Rachel. Awful timeout for Aston Martin. It's really bad when you got both of your drivers qualifying on the back row like that. That's nothing on the drivers at that point. It's all bad car, and that's what they had here. Especially getting outperformed by Alpine, which we kind of figured was going to be last place this year. Gasly still getting a point, doing magic in that car. One thing that I have really liked about the season so far is we have had a lot of really strong performances from every car, pretty much. Like even Alpine has, like you said, is up to 20 points. So they've had some good surprise points finishes. We had the whole podium, and even besides that, Sauber's getting points, Haas is getting good points. Like, it's good that every team is in it for something pretty much every weekend, or at least has a chance to be in it. But this was not Aston's weekend. Definitely was not to be for them. I think that's pretty much everything from Rachel's. We talked about all the McLaren stuff pretty well. So Thank you, Rachel, for your email. Last one comes in from Formula. Thank you, Mr. Formula. And he says, I rather enjoyed that one. That makes one of us. The part of me that is a Max fan is slowly coming to terms with reality. But the part of me that bleeds orange is ecstatic. Perhaps this is an awful thing to wish for, but I want to see some late season fireworks between Lando and Oscar. A bit of chippy behavior and snarky comments between them would be a blast. Side note, what do you think of this? That's a quote from Max Verstappen. It just ruins a nice classic wet race as well. So we either still try to push to go for a proper wet race, or we just say, you know what, we stop racing in the wet and we just wait for it to be dry. But that's not what you want, right? I think we can have some really cool wet racing like it showed also in Silverstone. A little hard to read a Max Verstappen quote out loud, I'm realizing, because
you don't have his exact same tone and
his manner of speaking English is different because it's not native language. But so it's a little odd to repeat word for word. But I digress. My thoughts on that is Max just wants to go racing. So, and for him, a wet race is probably as good a chance as any for a winner or a podium. So, of course, he wants to go racing in the wet. And I really respect that about him. But like, it's that fine line between you want a good spectacle, you want to go racing. Everyone wants to go racing. It's just it's dangerous when it's wet, and this track is particularly dangerous. And we've had people die at this track like within the last 10 years in Formula weekends. So you look at those types of instances which happened in dry conditions, at least from what I can remember, and you're throwing the extra bit of wet. We even non-fatal crashes. Lando Norris had a really scary crash here, qualifying in the wet. I think that was 2021, and you don't want that kind of stuff to happen. So I can appreciate them erring on the side of caution. I think they dragged it out a little too long. I think you probably could have gotten going and had as safe a race as you can have in the wet for Formula One. So I wish they had gotten it going a little bit quicker. Really, the main problem is what you mentioned earlier, is that they have wet weather tires. The whole point of the wet weather tires is to be able to go racing in the wet so that you have enough grip to be able to do that. It's just that the wet weather tire is so bad right now that no one wants to use it, because if you can put on the intermediate and keep the car on the track, you're going to go faster than the wet, even if the conditions are worse than what the intermediate should really be used for. And I think that is the biggest problem right now. Is you probably could have gotten the race going sooner if you had a wet weather tire that was functional. But yeah, that's my take on it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the problem, and I get what Max is trying to say, and to a certain extent, I think he's right. Um, they waited way too long. I mean, now granted, the fact that it cleared up and the sun came out is usually not what generally happens at Spa. Generally, it's going to stay cloudy, and it's going to take a while for that track to dry out. I think it dried out inordinately quick for Spa because the sun came out, it got warm really, really quickly, and we basically ended up with, I think, 9 racing laps on the intermediates. Um, I do think your best chance to see what you would call a classic wet weather race is only going to happen if the rain comes after they start. The trend, whether it's good or it's bad, is to be really conservative with that initial no go. To me, the way that I would have played it was we would have started, we would have ran 3-4 laps behind the safety car, we would have evaluated it then. Was it raining then or not? Go. And then if it starts to rain as bad as it did, that's when you stop. I mean, that's what we did with the British Grand Prix. We brought out the safety car. Now, the problem is when it's so wet that it doesn't matter. You can bring out the safety car and people still go skidding off, and this is a track that I'm remembering a W Series race from a few years ago where everybody was going up Eau Rouge and it was literally like 7 cars all into the same spot, the same wreck. They all wrecked the same way, and it looked really scary. I think one car ended up on top of the other car. It was like 7 of them, and they all did the exact same wreck because they all hit the same slick spot, and none of them could control it, and they were just passengers at that point. So, and you're right, we've had people die at this racetrack before. So, and the speeds are. The Piastri lap time will tell you that they're going around this track faster than anybody ever had before. So when you have all of that built in, and your job is to keep everybody safe. And the other thing, and this is what sucks about racing, but if there's a money factor here, you've got 20 cars that cost a lot of money to make, and you've got another race next weekend. And because you got another race this weekend, you got to pack it all up. You got to move it to Hungary. So you don't want to have people sliding off and wrecking cars and potentially not being able to go to the next one. To fly in enough spare parts to make another car. I mean, just remember, what was it last year? How many spare parts the Williams were doing? They were literally bringing in the busted pieces and evaluating them part by part and going, can we use this one? Yeah. Okay, good enough. We'll put that one back on the car. Is this one good enough? No, that one's cracked. No, we got to throw that one out. We can't use that one anymore because that's what you get to if you try to go too aggressive. So I understand the racer in Max, and as a fan, of course, I want to see wet races. Wet races are amazing, and they're part of Formula One. They're part of the history. But I do also know that there's a safety ground. So it was a very push-pull thing. Like I said, I think it was a number of circumstances that came together all at the same time. I think the race director got spooked by what happened in F3. He got spooked by what happened in F2 and said, no, we're not going to do this with our main show because we have the flexibility. That's why they make the schedule what it is. So let's use it. And I think that's what they came to. And we got our race in. We got full points. So is it the most entertaining thing? No. But did everybody get through it and get through it safely? Yes.
It was not a sham.
All 20 cars finished.
Yep. Yeah, that was another thing. I remember checking the recap at the end and was like, wow, like everyone finished. So like it can't have been that wet once they got going. Can't have been that bad. Yeah, it was not a sham of a race. It was a boring race in my opinion, but it wasn't a sham, which is good.
Yeah.
Just touching on a couple other points there. Yes, as a big Max fan, I have probably come to reality a few races ago. It was cool to see him get the sprint win for sure, and I'll be very happy to see him get any more wins this season. But it's all but written in stone at this point that his run of consecutive championships is going to come to the end. So Michael Schumacher gets to keep his record of 5 consecutive championships, which is still cool that record gets to be held by Michael Schumacher. But was really hoping that Max would equal that. And if you asked me sometime early last season, I would have thought it was a shoo-in for that to happen, but not to be. But you never know what's going to happen in the future. I'm sure he'll come back and try to be competitive next year, and who knows if he moves around after that. It's all in the future. He's got 4 championships. I'm very happy and impressed with what he's achieved, and still think he's one of the most exciting drivers to watch on track. I also think Oscar Piastri is very exciting to watch on track. So he's, in my humble opinion, he's got my vote for getting the championship this year. I think he's the more fun to watch on track most weekends. I would wish for more on track action between Lando and Oscar. We haven't really had a lot of really good battles between the two of them, considering the fact that they're like driving away from the field more often than not now. The one time where they did really have a good battle at the end, unfortunately, Lando had to go and run into the back of Oscar and take himself out of the race. So I'm sure McLaren is looking at all of those situations and being like, maybe not. Let's put you on different strategies. Let's space you out a little bit, which is really too bad. I don't want to see it get to the point of like Drew Blue fireworks like you had between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, because I'd really like these guys to both be able to keep racing at the same team and not hate each other's guts.
Yeah.
I think that would be better for everyone. They both seem like real nice guys. So it would be nice for them to just, enjoy racing against each other rather than come to hate each other. But that's just my opinion.
I mean, there has been, just as because I'm, I listen to the onboards, there is definitely, they are letting the race engineers do their own thing. There's no call from on high. There hasn't been, other than like the first race in Australia where they said, Oscar, you're going to hold for a minute while we're waiting for the track to dry out. Other than that, there has not been any sort of team edict from on high about anything other than, hey, just remember the rules, don't hit each other. That's really the only rule. They're
too close to try to pull stuff like that. Like it's less than one race worth of points between the two of them, and it keeps shifting around.
Right.
Like if they started making calls like that at this point, especially with how far out in front they are, it would not be received well at all. I could see it happening if Ferrari or Max was closer, but they're so far out in front at this point. Like, let them duke it out a little.
Oh yeah, no, and that's been the philosophy. But where my point was, the engineers are actually telling both guys stuff about the other car, so they're using the data from what they're getting, and they're trying to help their driver, and they're doing it in different ways. Because I'll listen to Tom Stallard tell something to Oscar about what Lando's doing, and it's very different from what Will Joseph is telling Lando about what Oscar's car is doing. So, I mean, they are free to fly. They're free to make their own strategy, and the call to the hard tire was a quick decision, and it was great that Lando made it. He didn't waffle on it, which is one of the things that he kind of does a lot, and sometimes frustrates the hell out of me, where he's like waiting for everybody else. He went to something different. It could have worked. It might have worked. And he's really only got himself to blame for it. Now, again, I think on high, I think the McLaren, when you're looking at Andrea Stella and Zach Brown, were they happy that they kind of separated the cars and had a nice 9-second gap between them for most of the race? Probably, because, they don't necessarily want to see the cars potentially coming together. But there's going to be opportunities for that to happen. And I do think once you get after the summer break, and people legitimately start talking about drivers' championship, and the math starts to come down to, let's actually figure out what our clinching scenarios are, and we're running out of races, I think it's going to get chippy. It has to at some point. Mm-hmm. They're gonna have it coming together. I would be shocked if it didn't happen. Put it that way.
Agreed. And thank you everyone for your emails. We do love reading them. It's good to hear from you guys so often, and know that you're a big fan of our show.
You guys keep us going. If it was not for this, there's weekends I go, oh man, it's hard, but you know what? We have people that actually enjoy what we have to say, so it's cool. So thank you guys for continuing to support the show as always. We love you, we appreciate you, and we want to be there for you. All right, so we will move into our awards. We'll start with the rubbish. Cody, I'll let you go first here. What you got?
My rubbish award is going to go to Aston Martin, just because they locked out the back row. They didn't get any points out of the weekend. They seem like they're pretty well locked into their spot And actually, no, I'm mixing them up with somebody else at this point
You're probably thinking
because
of Williams.
they are not well locked into
No,
their
they're
spot.
not.
They really need to get all the points they can get. Um, I mean, I know that they've pretty much written off this season for the sake of putting all their development into next year's car, but with how close it is between those midfield teams, like it's millions of dollars on the line for where you finish. Like I don't know about you, but I'd rather have millions of dollars than a few extra hours of wind tunnel time.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. My rubbish is going to go out to the good folks at Pirelli because I do not understand what their experiment was supposed to try to do. When I read it and we did the preview, and I'm like, oh, they're going with 2 compounds harder. Did we not watch last year's race? Did we not see the guy? Now, granted, he got disqualified, but the guy who finished first was George Russell. And he made a set of hard tires last for what, 30 some odd laps around that track or some ridiculous number like that. And our solution to that is we're going to reformulate the tire, but instead we're going to bring a C1, the hardest other than the C0. At least we didn't bring that thing. But we brought that, and we're going to make that the hard tire with the hope of let's make the rest of them have to stick to the medium and the soft. Well, your medium was way, way, way too good. So nice job going, Pirelli. You kind of totally your experiment wasn't going to work whether this was a dry race, a wet race, or whatever. I don't get it. I don't understand. You would have been better had you gone lower one grade of tire, because then we would have actually maybe gotten a 2-stopper out of this race. And for some people they did, but yeah, it just wasn't ever going to happen. And number one way to kill a Formula One race: put all 20 cars on the exact same tire at the exact same time. Welcome to a DRS train. That's what you saw. Yick. All right, we'll move into analysis paralysis. I think we have consensus here. It's been a while since we've both roasted the FIA, but it's going to be good to do it. Cody, what you got here?
My analysis paralysis does go to the FIA, and it's for waiting so long to get the race going. I understand, as I said, that this track does have a history of danger, perhaps more than some of the other tracks that we go racing at, but it did feel a little extreme for the FIA to wait until you can almost go over dry tires. I'm kind of agreeing with Max a little bit. It's either you go racing in the wet or you don't.
No, and I'm with you. To me, mine goes out to Race Control, who I think, like I said before, I think they got spooked by what they saw with F3. And you have to remember, those are children. They may be 17 or 18, but that you're still a child at 17 or 18. I'm sorry, that maybe my old man coming out. But come on. You can't let that affect your main show like you did. And to me, it's really simple. If we're good enough to go, we go until it isn't, and then we stop. Like, I understand the need for safety. I totally understand the need to want to keep everybody on track. We don't want to go green and then instantly see double yellow flag sector 1 and have 4 cars go running off into the La Source hairpin. I understand that. But at the same time, if the conditions are such that we can go racing, we should, until we shouldn't. And we want to keep everybody safe, but yeah, it's got to be better than this. This seemed a bit extreme, so Race Control gets my analysis paralysis here. All right, moving into our dark horse of the day. I'll go first with this one. I'm going to give this one to Williams and Alex Albon for a team that hadn't had a result in a while. It was good to see them fighting for and doing well in the top 10. Albon holds off the hard-charging Lewis Hamilton, who had himself a day, but Albon managed to hold him off for P6. And good going there. Cody, what you got?
My dark horse is actually going to go to Lewis Hamilton, who I feel like you rarely can consider Lewis Hamilton to be a dark horse, but with how his qualifying went, in both races, really, he was kind of the star of the on-track action during the race, and in a race where it looked like it was going to be pretty hard to pass, he did manage to fight his way all the way back up to P7. So I thought that was a really respectable performance, and he gets my dark horse.
All right, very good. We'll turn over to the driver of the day. I'll go first with this one. Pissed off Piastri, that's a thing, man. You could just tell. from the sprint qualifying to the movie put on Lando. He wanted this one, and he went out and took it, and never looked back because of it. So Oscar Piastri, driver of the day, easy one for me here.
Yeah, easy one for me as well. He gets the track record. He, gets the move done on the first lap in the Grand Prix. Pretty much walks away with the win. Wasn't really ever under a whole lot of pressure. Had a good bounce back after Lando's gotten the last couple and closed up that gap. So I think he's gonna come away from this one feeling really good about it, as he should. And if he gets the next win in Hungary, he's going to have the momentum really in his favor going into the summer break.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see where does this go now as we go into the summer break. But before we turn to that, we need to talk about predictions. Cody, sir, you had yourself one heck of a weekend. In fact, you swept the podium, sir. You finished the weekend with 6 points. You got the quality lap time because you were quicker than me. I looked pre-practice. They were doing 140
like a second.
I know. I'm looking pre-practice. I'm like, well, we're screwed. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. But you get the point for that. But you got P1 on the podium, P2 on the podium, and P3 on the podium in that order. So very well done, sir, there. You actually got the first four. You got the P4 with Max as you got predicted in P4, and you got P3 on the sprint as well. I finished the weekend respectable, but not quite as good as you. I got 4 points. I got P1 on the podium. I got the fastest overall lap time. I also got the P4 bonus pick, and I got P2 on the sprint podium, but it was not enough. You eat into my lead, and now I lead by a scant 1. This is going to be the race that comes down to the final race. I have a funny feeling because none of us have separated from this as we're now about halfway through the season. So I'm up with a score of 6-5, but you are right there, sir. All right, that will do it for our Belgian GP weekend. We flip over. We go to a very different circuit. We go to the Hungaroring, and then we take a break. Normally, when I think about Hungaroring, I think it's either going to be wet or it's going to be hot. So one of the two is probably going to happen. We shall see but it's a very different track from where we are here. I'd expect some other teams in the midfield to be a little bit stronger than some of the ones we saw here, but that's why we play the game. We shall see what's afoot. Cody, any final thoughts before we head on out?
I'm excited for the next race. I feel like Hungaroring is kind of maybe an underappreciated track. It's definitely very different than Spa, but a lot of the drivers do like racing there. It is, near Budapest, which is probably pretty cool, and it does produce some pretty exciting races. There's been a lot of good ones here over the years, and I'm hoping that. Ironically, I would have been looking forward more to Spa than Hungary, but now I'm thinking we might actually get the better race out of Hungary. So, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, usually right after a break, it's kind of one of those, it's like the last day of school where we don't care. And, we start throwing the cars up people's insides and around the outside. And it's got corners that produce that. So let's hope for a really good banger of a show next weekend. We'll be back to cover it. We'll get a preview out sometime later this week. And then we'll do the coverage of the race across next weekend as well. So for Cody, it's been Andy. As always, folks, take care of yourselves out there. And remember, may all your laps be fast.